Hi, back in May of this year, you were introduced in another video to this NuTone 2054 master station. It didn't look like this in the other video because this is the chassis out of a 2054. This was a new old stock model 2054 from, wait, what's the date code? 1965. It's upside down. I'll link in that video with one of those little pop-up tags right there so you can go watch that if you're interested. This is getting ready to go off to a brand new home. It's going to go to a mid-century modern house that's been completely remodeled down in the Los Angeles area, and I'm just wrapping up a few little odds and ends on it and getting it ready to ship out with all the other equipment, which I'll show you at the end of this video, to a brand new customer in a brand new house. Vintage, but brand new. I thought I'd go over briefly what was done to this to get it ready for its new life in Los Angeles. This was truly a new old stock unit, and you should check out the other video if you want to see what that's all about. Even though it was new old stock, it was still made in 1965. So it needs some amount of refurbishment to get it ready so it will go the next 20-25 years without any kind of problems. There was very, very little to do on this. And I'll have to say up front that this was a joy and a pleasure to work on. I have fixed a lot of NuTone intercom systems like this from this era, and they're old and they're worn and they're dirty and they're in really bad shape, and it takes a lot of effort to get them back in really good condition so they work the way they're supposed to. This one didn't need any of that kind of stuff. It just needed some basic updating. So what did I find? When I did a little initial testing on it, one of the things I found was this is a 5-tube set, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and out of the 5 tubes, these are all original NuTone tubes, not that one. One of the tubes was actually bad, and that's this one right here. This is a NuTone branded tube made in the USA. I think it might say who the actual manufacturer was. Let's take a look and see. This was made by Sylvania. Sylvania probably needed to do a better job because this tube has actually got a short in it. It's actually bad. Was that the reason why this was a new old stock unit? It had a bad tube and nobody ever bothered to check it out or do anything about it, and it ended up on the shelf somewhere in somebody's warehouse and there it sat for all those decades? Could be. And it's also kind of unusual that the 12AX7 of all the tubes in a set like this would be the one that would be bad. So it probably maybe was bad out of the box. Don't really know. There's always bound to be a few. Happened back then, happens today. So it's not unlikely. So that was replaced with another 12AX7 here. And for those of you who know anything about vacuum tubes, 12AX7s are one of those sort of magical tubes that everybody's got their favorite flavor of when they go to buy one. And to give you sort of a perspective on that, most common small signal radio tubes, you can buy them brand new for anywhere from, $10 to $12, $14 a piece, maybe a little more for some of the little rarer ones. They're not very expensive. And you don't have a lot of choice. A 12BE6 is a 12BE6 and it's just what it is. A 12AX7 is different. There are literally dozens and dozens of different types of 12AX7s that you can buy. It has sort of a magical aura around it depending on which one you buy. People that are solidly into tube equipment, they like to do something called tube rolling, which is they buy different versions of the same tube and they roll through them, putting them into their amplifiers to see which one gives it that special sound that they're looking for. You want it to be velvety smooth like dark chocolate. You certainly don't want it to sound like white chocolate, because that wouldn't be good at all. We didn't go crazy on the 12AX7. I believe the one I chose is the one I normally choose for sets like this, and I think it cost me about, I think it was $22, which is not the lowest low-end one, but it's also not the high-end one, because you can buy 12AX7s for up to $500 a tube. And that would just be silly, because you're not going to hear the difference in a set like this because of what it's being used for. That's just my little thing about vacuum tubes. So that tube was replaced. The other thing that needed to be done was these were replaced. What are these? These are epoxy coated paper capacitors. And these are all low value capacitors. They're all 0. 0.047. While these are technically brand new, never been used, they were made in 1965, and these won't have any kind of real life once you start putting power through them. There is a shelf life on parts like this. There's a useful life, the number of hours you can expect them to last in use, but also there's a shelf life, and if these sit around in somebody's warehouse for, you know, say 50 years, they might test good today, but probably within the next few weeks or a month, they'll start to go bad and they need to be replaced. So those were all replaced, and those were replaced with these little yellow ones right here. Same exact value, just sort of to give you an idea of how much things have gotten smaller in the last 50 years. The other thing that needed to be done with this was we had to deal with this. This is the primary filter capacitor for the power supply, and this is a 3-section capacitor. This is 3 capacitors in one, so it would be as if you took 3 of these, and it's not individual parts. It's not like you put these inside the cardboard tube. It's actually the way the tube is formed, and it creates 3 capacitors inside of it. Parts like this are not readily available any longer. There are a few companies that still make multi-section can capacitors. However, it always seems that you never can really find the values that you want, and also size in this case is very important because the space it has to fit into is very limited. There is a company that will make them special order. They are hugely expensive, not anywhere near worth the cost for what it is, in my opinion. You know, if you're a die-hard purist and you need to replace the multi-section can capacitor in your vintage Macintosh amplifier, go for it. It's the thing to do. But in a NuTone intercom system, not really the best choice. The thing that makes this so difficult to replace is its size and its location. It originally sat on the circuit board right here where the screwdriver is, and it's stuck up, and this is a little shielding piece here that gets reassembled when the set goes back in the faceplate, and it slides down like this, and as you can see, it's got a cutout in it right there. Actually, it's got 2 cutouts, a big one and a little one. The little one is to let the tube poke through, and the bigger one is where the capacitor would poke through. Even if you found something that was similar to this, if it's not the right size, and also it has to be able to mount with the lugs onto the board, and they have to be the right size, and we don't like drilling holes in vintage boards if we don't have to. It also has to be the right diameter so it fits through the cutout in the shield, and also it can't be too tall because then it interferes with where the switch assembly goes in. That's a lot of restrictions for one part that you might pay if you get something that's really, really close, and maybe you would modify all this, which again, I don't really like to do, especially in a new old stock unit that is perfect. It costs a lot of money. You might spend $80 for this, and they're not going to do that. So what did we do? I came up with something that was a more clever idea, which we do on other models also. As you can see here, what I made was I made a little daughter board. This is a modern piece of project PCB material. What I did was I mounted on it 3 individual capacitors, 1, 2, 3. They're wired in correctly on the bottom of the board to replicate what's inside this. And then we broke out our vintage looking cloth covered wire, and it's soldered to the correct points on the board, and then it loops around underneath, and it's soldered into the holes where the original lugs would have been soldered to make up the proper connections. This is a much better way to do this, and actually once you do it once, then you have the pattern for the board and so forth already, so the next time I have to do one of these, I don't have to think about it as much. I already know what I'm going to do. I know which capacitors I want to use, I know the shape of the board, I know the layout of the parts, I know how I'm going to run the wires. And actually, if you look carefully here, you'll see we've got 3 different colors of wires. We've got green, which is kind of tucked underneath here, yellow, black, and red, and each one on the diagram that goes with the template for the board, it shows which color is for which connection, and they go down under here and solder it into the board. And to make it extra tricky, I have to provide a way to allow the tube to poke through. So I made a little round cutout in the board so it fits around the tube, because the tube is the tube, that's where it's got to be, and that's the size that it is. The other thing that I did with this, because like I said, I don't like to alter sets any more than possible, is I removed one of the screws that holds the circuit board here, the main circuit board, into the bottom of the chassis here, and then I put a longer screw with a spacer, the little white nylon post, and then it's screwed into the chassis, and there's a nut on the bottom, and that's what holds this in place. This one over here, this isn't actually attached to anything. This is more like a little leg on the corner, because I didn't like the idea of it being held on only in one spot, and I didn't want the board to flex up and down because it's just sloppy that way. So I created this little leg out of all nylon parts to hold it so it can't be pushed down, because I don't think anybody's going to be pushing it around anyway, but it maybe just made me feel better, and it looks like we made an attempt. And then there's an insulating card underneath to cover up all the solder connections so nothing would accidentally short out. So I think this was a good, elegant way to solve the problem of this. One of the things that most people wouldn't think about and don't know, and sometimes they seem shocked when it comes up in conversations, is whenever we get a tube set in, whether it's a new old stock one like this, or it's just somebody's used set from 50 years ago that needs to be gone through and rebuilt, I never ever turn them on before I start, because you run the risk, if it's in really bad condition, of possibly damaging components or parts in the set that are very difficult to or impossible to replace. Here we have an audio isolation transformer for the intercom. Here we have the output transformer for the entire set. And there are times that components can fail and tubes can be shorted, and something like this can get burnt out. And you turn it on because you're curious, and then there's a big giant puff of black smoke and your output transformer is dead. It's fried. Where are you going to get a replacement for this? Well, if you want an exact replacement, you got to scavenger one out of another set, and that's kind of wasteful. Or you have to search around and try to find a suitable replacement, a modern one. It's a little on the small side, and it's got to fit on the board correctly, and it's just better not to do that. So I never ever turn sets on before I start. I've done it long enough, and I'm confident enough that in the end, when we get it all serviced and rebuilt and put it all back together, it should turn on and play the first time. That's the goal. Was that true with this one? Well, almost. Even though this was a brand new old stock unit, when I turned it on the very first time, and there's really a procedure that you follow when you do that, you hook it up to an isolated power supply, you hook it up with a watt meter so you can measure and observe the wattage it's drawing, the amount of power it's using, and as the tubes come up and everything begins to turn on, if you have any serious problems, you'll see that in the meter, and then you can turn it off before you let the magic smoke out. This one turned on perfectly. It was exactly what I would expect it to be, but it didn't play the first time. And I thought, uh-oh, now what? Maybe there was other reasons why it was on somebody's shelf for 50 years. All it turned out to be was this switch. Was it this one or was it this one? I forget now, because this was like a week ago. Oh no, it was this one. This switch was dirty. So I worked it back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and after 4 or 5 times, the radio came on and played. That was great. The only other servicing that I did with this was I very carefully and very lightly cleaned the 3 slide switches, because if this one was a little oxidized and needed to be cleaned, odds are these would benefit from it also. This is the intercom switch, this is the master speaker volume, high, low, and off, and this is your AM or phono input. The phono input is here on the bottom. That does work. The volume control is an on-off volume control, and it's just as smooth and clean and perfect sounding as you would ever expect. The reception on the unit is outstanding. The other part of it is, this is the switchboard assembly. And you've got your 8 room control switches, and on the back of this, are all the screws, so it's also a terminal board. This is where all the wiring from all the remote speakers are connected. These switches also perfect. They move perfectly. There's no sloppiness in them. I did clean these just the tiniest bit because again, they've been sitting around for a long time and we don't want them to be intermittent. Switches like this, if they're new, even if they sit around, the contacts will oxidize, and really mostly by sliding them back and forth, you'll clean them up. But since it's going to a customer, we want everything to be really right. So I went ahead and just did a little bit of deoxit cleaner in each switch just to make sure that they worked really well. So as I said, this was a joy to work on, but now I've got to put it back together so you can hear what it sounds like, because I think that's what everybody wants. Our NuTone Model 2051-2054 has been reassembled, and it's turned on, and it's warmed up. For those of you who don't know, vacuum tube sets, when you turn them on, if they're in really, really good condition, it'll take 15, 20, 25 seconds or so before all the tubes warm up enough that they actually work. So you have to wait for the sound to come on. You don't get instant radio like on solid state sets. As you can see, we're also recording this with the shop lights turned off. The shop lights create a lot of radio interference on AM. When we test sets on AM, we always turn the lights off to eliminate the interference. And since this is an AM only model, we have the lights off. We have better ambiance that way. Just the reflected light from one spotlight on the set. The controls on this are very simple. We have an on-off volume control. This would be the system volume control. It's adjusts the gain level, the volume level for the entire system. We have the intercom listen and talk switch. We have master speaker switch, which has 3 settings, low, off, and high. There is no individual volume control for the master station. It's just low or high or off. Here we have our 2 inputs. We have phono and intercom, or radio and intercom, and our knob to tune radio stations. It's a very, very simple design. Connected up to it, we have one NuTone Model 2024 inside remote station. This is a new old stock station. The customer who's buying this equipment has bought 3 of these from me because he needs 3 of them for in his house. These are slightly earlier than this model. This is more like 1958 through 1962-ish. These were the best 3 that I had, and they're completely compatible with this system. It's just the earliest design, metal grille, punch louver here. It says NuTone down the middle, volume control intercom switch. Very simple, very sturdy construction. Later on, they would change the styling a little bit, and then after that, by the time actually you get to this system, the grills were made out of plastic. If we go ahead and turn the radio on, and we turn the speaker on here,
Papa and Lund presents the Caboose Pistol.
Turn this down, and our tuning is excellent. That's 680. I think we can go back up. We might be able to get 560.
All these different media people egging on the Democrats to pass.
And you might think, well, that's okay. No, it's very good, because watch.
1969. If the Republicans had started packing the court during Trump's first 4 years, these states.
We'll go back down.
I'm telling you.
680.
Let's start with this one. Would appreciate it.
740.
810 traffic is sponsored
810, strongest station we have around here.
Man, just that little bit of hope is enough.
This is kind of position to be able to do something that
Apartment 4. In other words, the warrant was not served as a no-knock.
It's almost perfect. One of the things that I tell people about when they call about their early NuTone tube set is, one of the disadvantages that I have is, up until now, have never seen any NuTone tube sets when they were brand new. All the ones I see are old and tired and dirty and seriously in need of repair. It's always hard to know how much to expect out of a set that was designed, sometimes in the late 50s through the mid 60s. How good is the reception? How good is the sound? How quiet is the system? Those kind of things you don't really know unless you were there when they were new, and new ones and up until now don't come along very often. This one is going to be sort of my benchmark for what I expect out of a set now. We always go for the best that we possibly can, but you have to be careful. You can't always apply 20/20 standards to reception, especially on FM, to a set that was made in, say, 1962. Are you asking too much out of it? Is it not quite that good because it's an early design and all of those things? It's hard to know sometimes. You go for the very best you can get out of it, but sometimes you wish that it was a little better. Now we have an example of a set that is truly like brand new. And one of the things I noticed right off the bat on this one when I powered it up the very first time was that noise on tube radios is not uncommon. There's oftentimes a little bit of background hum or hiss on the set. Now the hiss is okay because that's a vacuum tube thing. Hum, not so much. So on this one, the other thing I noticed was this is our on-off system volume control. It adjusts how much amplification there is that's sent out to all the remote speakers. If you have things set up correctly, you would have the remote speakers, the master on high usually, and your individual speakers, you have them turned all the way up, so it's in the intercom range. If you turn it down too far, it affects how well the intercom works. So we have that turned up. This is barely up at all. And just to show you, that's off. So off is about 630 and on is about 7. And normal listening volume, put it back on the radio. Back up here.
Celebrities, whether it's sports celebrities or music celebrities or movie actors, singers or strippers, the people we turn to in the time of need, John. Yes, so of course she's got to get the vote on, right?
Listening volume, it's not quite 9 o'clock. Now if this was in a house, it might be a little higher. You might be somewhere between 9 and 9:30. That's exceptionally good. I would say on an average, most of these sets that I've worked on, by the time we're done rebuilding them, this is going to be set somewhere between like 11 and 12. Now the more speakers you have, the more adjustment, the more gain you need, but it's still not anywhere near as good as this one. So this is now the new benchmark. We'll put that back where it belongs. The other thing which is interesting is if we turn this on high,
but here goes.
And we move the selector input to phono, and we listen here carefully. In fact, I'm just going to turn this up a little more. It has the very littlest bit of buzz, just a little tiny bit. And of course, if we put this on low, it's substantially less. And if we turn this down just a little bit, that's about the threshold. There's virtually no sound. Now, one of the things that could be going on here, where a little bit of that stray noise is coming from, has to do with the phono input, which is here in the access hole on the bottom. This is your standard RCA phono input, and right now it's an unterminated input, and it may be picking up a little bit of stray electrical or RF noise through that input because it is a high gain input. If you wanted to eliminate that as a source of a possible some of the noise, what you would do is buy an RCA shorting plug, which you can buy online, and you would plug that in there, and that essentially caps off the input so no stray signals or electrical noise is going to come in through there, and that's always a good thing to do. This set is pristinely quiet. It's really, really nice to hear a set that there's nothing to hear. It actually sounds really, really, really good. That's the end of section 1 of this video. I'm gonna do a little section 2 at the end at the office, and I'm gonna put out all of the equipment that the customer is buying to show you what you can build into a brand new vintage installation. So I'll see you back at the office. I almost forgot. We were going on and on and on about the radio and everything, and we forgot to do the intercom. That's important. So the intercom is very simple. I have the remote speaker turned up into intercom range, and basically all you have is a talk and listen switch. Since this is a 3-wire system, as all early NuTone intercom systems were, except for the 2561 and the 2400 system, even though it works pretty much the same way, it's like the intercom works like walkie-talkies. You push and talk, and they push and answer back. It's very simple. So, and there'll be feedback, so get ready. So here's talk. Oops. Works better if you turn the remote speaker on. Here's talk. And here's talk from here. Gotta love the feedback, don't you? Very nice gain on the intercom also. Maybe that's thanks to our brand new 12AX7 tube, because that's the intercom preamp tube. It's doing a bang up job. It looks like get a lot of play for your $22, don't you think? Imagine how it would be if I had spent $499 on a 12AX7. It would sound smooth and velvety like liquid chocolate flowing down a river with elves in a boat and maybe unicorns and ponies and bunnies dancing on the shore. Don't you think? Because that's what tube people think. So we're at the office, and today's the day that all of this equipment is going to get shipped out to its new owner in Los Angeles. And this is what his vintage new installation is going to consist of. You've got the 2051 master station that's been completely rebuilt. He's got 3 inside 2024 stations, and as I showed in an earlier section, these are new old stock units. He has 1 N2006 front door station. This is also a new old stock item. And then he's got an 8-inch patio station with a patio remote control. What we did with each one of these, all of this has been checked and they all function correctly. The patio remote control is from 1968. It's a couple years later than the master station, but that's all right. You could just pretend that they added it in later on. And it is the correct style, and it functions the same because all of these early 3-wire systems work the same way. He already put all the rough ends and wiring were sent to him months ago, and he's got all of that in place. For the patio station itself, since patio stations have a really hard life and nobody wants a worn out vintage patio station, what we did was we took a grill from a NuTone ISA78, which is exactly the same grill as you would have had in 1965, and then on the back of it we put an 8-inch 3.2 ohm speaker cone, because all of this system uses 3.2 ohm speaker cones, so it's an identical setup as to what you would have had in, say, 1965. He's also got, it came with the original owner's manual. It comes with the original installation instructions, and in these little bags are all the mounting hardware and screws and things to mount in the wall housing for the master station so he can mount it to the wall. To help him out a little bit, since this is a vintage system and you're not going to find a lot of detailed help anywhere about how to actually install it, I made him a video which only he gets to see. By the way, it's not going to be on the YouTube channel. It's a private video of how to install the mounting hardware and how the master station mounts into the wall housing and those kind of things. The hookup on a system like this is fairly straightforward. He's only got 5 sets of 3-conductor wire to hook up, so that's relatively straightforward to do. So I know he's very excited about it. He actually sent me a picture of the wall housing. I think it's in the kitchen area because it's in a tiled wall and it looks like pretty fancy kind of tile. So I think they're ready to go on this, and I know he sent me an email back to say he's very excited and can't wait to get it all hooked up and working. This is how what you can do if you can put together enough vintage equipment. You can put in a brand new vintage system, And in his case, it's a mid-century modern house, so it's completely appropriate. I hope you found all of this interesting and perhaps helpful. If you did, please give it a thumbs up on YouTube because that helps us just a little bit. There'll be a banner right here that shows you how to subscribe. Go to our YouTube homepage, click on the bell, and when you click on the bell, click on it to receive all notifications. And every time we post a new video, you'll get a notification and you can watch it. That's all for today. See you on the next video.